and we bring from those dialogues 3 concrete priorities into COP30. First, boost investment in electricity grids urgently. In 2024, 700 gigawatts of renewables were added globally, and yet despite this, emissions still grew by around 1%. And another 1,700 gigawatts of renewables are still awaiting connections to the grid. And if those 1,700 gigawatts had also been connected in 2024, rather than seeing an increase in emissions in that year, we would have seen a decrease in emissions. They would have gone down and not up. Second, the IEA has been honored to support Brazil in the development of its Belém 4X pledge on sustainable fuels. Scaling up sustainable fuels in line with this pledge can complement electrification and energy efficiency, supporting transition and energy diversification. We see this pledge as a positive rallying call in this important area that needs further action. Third and last, we must ensure that the benefits of energy transition are felt much more widely than they are today. More energy investment must flow into emerging and developing economies. Only 2% of clean energy investment today is in Africa. Only 2%. And more must also be done to overcome the tragic fact that 1/4 of the global population still cooks with traditional toxic fuels that link to 2.7 million premature deaths each year. We at the International Energy Agency will continue to work with our partners to overcome such terrible energy inequalities. And we are so grateful to President Lula and Brazil for putting such a strong focus on the most vulnerable and the least responsible in society. We must ensure that no one is left behind. Thank you. Obrigado.
Convidamos agora o assessor especial da Presidência do Banco Interamericano de Desenvolvimento, Avinash Persaud.
Your Excellencies, Ministers, friends, bon dia. I speak to you on behalf of Ilan Goldfein, President of the Inter-American Development Bank. We are proud to be the current chair of climate heads of the Multilateral Development Banks. The MDBs have been acting in recent years as a system, and I can report to you, pleased to report to you, that that system is strong and stronger than ever before. Last year, the Multilateral Development Banks delivered a record $118 billion mobilized and invested directly to low and middle-income countries on climate action. Within that figure, the proportion, the amount for resilience and adaptation has doubled since 2019. We want to do more. We're on track to do more. But we recognize that, especially for vulnerable countries, more debt, however low cost it is, however long-term it is a challenge. And so we're also expanding debt swaps, the ability for countries to release funds for resilience without increasing debt. We will be launching here and a new initiative at COP, a first multi-guarantor debt swap facility to enable us to expand the size and amount of those debt swaps. We are also expanding the amount of pause clauses in debt to make debt more shock absorbing. We recognize the importance of investing in resilient public infrastructure, but we're also prioritizing ways to catalyze the private sector to mobilize that money into national development priorities. We know that the billions to trillions has so far been elusive, and we propose some new instruments here at COP, Reinvest Plus, where the multilateral development banks may act as a bridge between those with the money and the capital internationally, but without the risk appetite, and with those locally with the experience of navigating local conditions, but without the money. We can act as a bridge to catalyze and get us from the billions to trillions. We're also launching Colabara, because we need not just debt, but we also need equity. And here in Belém, at the doorstep of the Amazon, we are scaling up our Amazonia Forever, an umbrella of holistic programs, because we know that we cannot stop deforestation unless we're also building resilient livelihoods. Here in Belém, vision can become reality. We believe that with partnership, with innovation, with collective purpose, we can turn ambition into action and action into implementation. Thank you very much.
Neste momento, convidamos para ouvir a manifestação do senhor Pablo Gentili, que aqui representa a presidência executiva da Corporação Andina de Fomento.
Excelentísimos jefes de Estado, distinguidas autoridades nacionales e internacionales, señoras y señores, les traigo el saludo fraterno, afectuoso del presidente del Banco de Desarrollo de América Latina y el Caribe, Sergio Díaz Granados. Gracias, presidente Lula, por recibirnos nuevamente en su casa, aquí, en esta tierra generosa, en Belén, corazón del Amazonas, corazón del planeta. La enorme acogida de esta plenaria y de las sesiones que la acompañan, así como el éxito que le espera la COP30, ratifican a Brasil como un potente motor de integración. CAF, el Banco de Desarrollo de América Latina y el Caribe, es la principal fuente de financiación al desarrollo de la región y vamos camino a ser el Banco de Desarrollo con mayor cobertura geográfica. Tenemos 57 años de historia y 24 países accionistas. Ese crecimiento sostenido está conectando los ecosistemas estratégicos de la región. Somos el Banco Verde y Azul de América Latina y el Caribe y lo demostramos con los hechos. Hace 4 años nos comprometimos a destinar 25.000 millones de dólares a operaciones verdes en un lapso de 5 años y ya hemos alcanzado el desembolso de más de 20.000 millones de dólares. Hoy, más del 40% de nuestro financiamiento es verde y hemos hecho de la innovación financiera nuestro sello institucional. Desde 2021, el banco ha crecido un 33% y sus aprobaciones se han duplicado. Pero debemos, podemos y queremos hacer más. Nuestros países socios nos han autorizado a buscar nuevos aliados. Podemos hacerlo y para eso podemos contar con mecanismos tales como intercambios de cartera, bonos híbridos o el uso de los derechos especiales de giro de los cuales somos tenedores autorizados. La puerta de nuestro banco estará siempre abierta en la región y fuera de ellas. Esperamos llegar al 2031 con una cartera de 90.000 millones de dólares. Al menos 40.000 millones de ellos serán de cartera verde. Excelencias, la COP30 plantea grandes retos y desde CAF estamos poniendo nuestra parte para contribuir a su éxito. Más ambición, más financiación y acción transformadora desde el corazón de la Amazonia, poniendo el foco en la adaptación y protección de la biodiversidad. En estos ejes tenemos metas a 2030 y alzamos la voz de la región en el contexto global. Les pedimos a ustedes, los y las lideresas globales, su respaldo para que la nuestra siga siendo una institución que crezca y nuestra región, que hoy los acoge, que hoy nos acoge generosamente con los brazos abiertos, siga siendo un territorio de esperanza y de soluciones globales. Muchas gracias.
Convidamos a diretora executiva do Fundo das Nações Unidas para a Infância, Catherine Roussel.
Excellencies, thank you very much for giving me the floor, and thank you to His Excellency President Lula and the COP30 presidency for convening us here in Belém. Children today live in a world that is hotter and more polluted than the one we all grew up in. This crisis is at its heart a child rights crisis. Children make up 1/3 of the world's population and half of all people living in extreme poverty. Half the world's children live in countries at extreme risk of climate change. Because children are smaller, with less developed systems, they are much more vulnerable to climate change than adults are. The risks to children begin even before they take their first steps. For every 1 degree Celsius increase in temperature, the odds of a pregnant woman experiencing a preterm or stillbirth rise by 5%. Once born, the threats continue. During heat waves, children's bodies heat up faster and sweat less efficiently, putting them at greater risk. They also breathe twice as fast as adults, which means they inhale more polluted air. By the 2050s, children's exposure to heat waves is projected to increase 8-fold. Already, 1 in 5 children experiences at least double the number of extremely hot days each year compared to when their grandparents were children. Climate events are growing in frequency and severity. The science is clear about what needs to be done. What is less clear is, will we meet the challenge? Will the world act to protect children? We know what we must urgently do, which is to reduce emissions. A just energy transition will bring enormous benefits for children, reducing air pollution, which accounts for 15% of all under 5 deaths, and creating new opportunities for young people in the green economy. We must scale up investments in adaptation and in the response to loss and damage, particularly in the basic services children rely on to survive and thrive: health, education, water and sanitation, nutrition, and social protection. UNICEF welcomes the growing recognition of children's needs in national plans and the COP process. Today, 70% of the nationally determined contributions include child-sensitive commitments, and 70 governments have signed the Declaration on Children, Youth, and Climate Action. We commend your leadership and reaffirm UNICEF's readiness to support your efforts. Children need and deserve a cleaner, safer planet. The question for all of us is, will we meet that challenge? Thank you very much.
Nesse momento, chamamos o diretor de clima da Organização das Nações Unidas para a Agricultura e Alimentação, Kaveh Zaed.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, achieving climate goals will require a systems change, fast and at scale, as was made clear during the global stocktake at COP28. And at the center of this change is the transformation of global agri-food systems to be more efficient, more inclusive, more resilient, and more sustainable. This transformation is essential for achieving the Paris Agreement and much more. Agri-food systems can address multiple challenges simultaneously. They can strengthen livelihoods, ensure food security, and conserve and restore the natural ecosystems on which we depend. Without changing how we produce, distribute, and consume foods, our goals for addressing the impacts of the climate crisis or preserving biodiversity and food diversity and addressing hunger will not be met. The Belém Declaration on Hunger, Poverty and Human-Centered Climate Action shows just how interconnected these agendas are and how we must respond with systems solutions. But science and experience shows what works. Well-designed agricultural interventions reduce emissions, boost carbon sequestration, and revive ecosystems, while ensuring food security and nutrition for the world's growing population. From the restoration of degraded agricultural lands to resilient crops and sustainable agriculture and livestock, we have the solutions that deliver across sectors. For example, agroforestry initiatives such as mixed crops help farmers earn higher and diversified incomes, as well as protecting soil health, pest control, and pollination. Here in the Amazon region, agroforestry projects are restoring degraded lands while supporting local communities, a triple win for biodiversity and food diversity, for food security, and for the climate. But of course, potential is not enough. Investment remains far below what is needed to deliver agri-food system transformation at scale. Despite an increase in critical agri-food investments by the Green Climate Fund and the Global Environment Facility, forestry, livestock, fisheries, and crop production together still receive just 4% of total climate-related development finance. For a sector that can deliver a third of global emission reductions, this gap is not only unequal, it is a lost opportunity. By overlooking agri-food systems, we are leaving one of the most effective pathways to low-emission growth untapped. Investing in sustainable and resilient agri-food systems, including forests, is one of the smartest choices we can make for climate action. And for the four betters: better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and a better life, leaving no one behind. Thank you.
Nesse momento, teremos a manifestação do diretor-geral da Organização Mundial de Saúde, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus.
Thank you, moderator. Your Excellency President Lula, Excellencies, dear colleagues and friends. WHO thanks Brazil for hosting COP30. Here in the heart of the Amazon, the lungs of the earth, we're reminded that healthy people depend on a healthy planet. If our planet were a patient, it would be admitted to intensive care. Its vital signs are alarming. It's running a high fever, with the average global temperatures increasing year after year. Its lung capacity is compromised, with the destruction of forests that absorb carbon dioxide and produce oxygen. And many of the Earth's water sources, its lifeblood, are contaminated. Most concerning of all, its condition is deteriorating. A sick planet means sick people. The climate crisis is a health crisis, not in the future, but now. It's already spreading disease, worsening malnutrition, displacing communities, and claiming lives through heat, floods, fires, and pollution. Health is the strongest argument for climate action. It's much easier to convince people of the need to protect their own health or that of their children than to protect glaciers or ecosystems. Both are important. One is a lot closer to home. We welcome Brazil's leadership through the Belém Health Action Plan and the inclusion of health in the COP30 activation agenda. And we commend the Baku COP President's Continuity Coalition for Climate and Health, which is an important step to institutionalize health as a central part of COP presidencies. WHO is supporting more than 100 countries to build climate-friendly and climate-resilient health systems through the Alliance for Transformative Action on Climate and Health, or ATTACH. But there is still one step to go: making health a formal topic in UN climate negotiations. It's also worrying that health-specific climate action remains severely underfunded, capturing only 2% of adaptation funding and 0.5% of multilateral climate funding. So our call today is simple: put health at the center of every climate decision. Direct climate finance towards protecting lives and livelihoods, and recognize health as a measure of climate ambition and success, because there can be no healthy people on a sick planet. I will repeat, because there can be no healthy people on a sick planet. Obrigado. I thank you.
Nesse momento, teremos a manifestação do gerente adjunto do Fundo Monetário Internacional, Bollywood.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, COP30 takes place in a challenging context. Growth is not as strong as we need, and uncertainty is high. Poor and vulnerable countries face additional challenges, such as high debt service costs and cuts to development assistance. In this context, unfortunately, the world is not on track to achieve goals of the Paris Agreement, as shown by a forthcoming IMF paper. There is an ambition gap. NDCs, including new pledges submitted ahead of COP30, would cut emissions by only 7% from 2019 levels, compared to the 30% needed to limit temperature increase to 1.5 degrees. And there is an implementation gap as well. IMF analysis suggests the gap between promises and practice is such that current policies will see global emissions rise by 9% by 2035. In part, the shortfall is driven by explicit fossil fuel subsidies, which amounted to $800 billion last year alone, that effectively constitute a negative carbon price. By making it cheaper to burn oil, coal, and gas, these subsidies are in direct opposition to our climate goals. Putting emissions on a path compatible with the Paris Agreement would entail significant macroeconomic shifts. Many countries working towards their national mitigation goals call on us to examine the macroeconomic implications of these shifts. The IMF can discuss the most efficient and fiscally sound policy options to achieve countries' climate objectives. For fossil fuels exporting countries facing potential revenue losses, we discussed economic and fiscal diversification strategies, such as putting revenue into sovereign wealth funds or developing low-carbon exports. Climate change and extreme weather events already threaten economic stability and put pressure on budgets and external positions in many countries. The IMF is working to map these threats into macroeconomic and debt sustainability frameworks. When relevant, we have also included climate-related risks into our financial sector assessment programs. We advise on policies to enhance resilience, including through technical assistance, data and capacity development. Through the Resilience and Sustainability Trust, we also provide affordable lending to reduce climate-related risks to prospective balance of payment stability in low-income and vulnerable middle-income countries. We have approved 26 countries with RSF arrangements so far, with total commitments of about $14 billion. In the context of ongoing RSFs, we can also work with country authorities to help them mobilize and coordinate climate finance by convening dedicated roundtables. One thing we found through these roundtables is that public sector and private sector have to work together to scale up climate finance. Public sector has to assume more risk by providing equity investment or providing guarantees as a way to de-risk for the private sector. And private sector have to be innovative and also look through short-term fluctuation for long-term gains and long-term profitability. Thank you.
E neste momento teremos a manifestação do secretário-geral da Organização do Tratado de Cooperação Amazônica, Martin von Hildebrand.
Excelencias, distinguidos delegados, muy buenas tardes. Es un honor dirigirme en nombre de la Organización del Tratado de Cooperación Amazónica, OTCA, una organización de los países amazónicos Bolivia, Brasil, Colombia, Ecuador, Guyana, Perú, Surinam y Venezuela. Y allí trabajamos juntos para cuidar la Amazonía y a casi 50 millones de personas que aquí viven, celebrando una de las mayores diversidades culturales del planeta. La Amazonía reúne más de 500 pueblos indígenas y centenares de lenguas en paisajes rurales y también urbanos, con casi el 70% de su población en ciudades. Es una región plural, contemporánea y en permanente cambio. Esta floresta, manejada ancestralmente por pueblos diversos, es esencial para el equilibrio climático, para la vida de millones de todos en el planeta. La humedad que llega desde el Atlántico se recicla sobre la selva por evaporación y transpiración y forma ríos voladores que llevan lluvias a gran parte de Sudamérica. Los países amazónicos sabemos que el equilibrio y funcionamiento de esos ciclos es imperativo para mantener nuestro bienestar. Hemos avanzado mucho en ese sentido, pero también sabemos que podemos y debemos hacer mucho más. Estamos comprometidos con detener la deforestación y la degradación en nuestros territorios, pero si el calentamiento global no se frena, la ciencia advierte que la Amazonía puede colapsar a pesar de nuestros esfuerzos locales. Mantener el funcionamiento de la selva y su conectividad con los océanos es una responsabilidad global. Del lado de los países amazónicos, gobiernos y sociedades civiles hemos avanzado. El 47% de la Amazonía está bajo figuras de protección legalmente reconocidas, lo que vale a casi 300 millones de hectáreas, de las cuales la mitad es territorio indígena. Estas cifras representan un logro extraordinario, fruto de la cooperación y del compromiso regional durante las últimas 3 décadas. Aún así, quedan muchas tareas por hacer. Consolidar lo avanzado, implementar plenamente las áreas protegidas, fortalecer la gestión de los pueblos indígenas en sus territorios, restaurar la conectividad perdida y seguir adelante con eficiencia, sinergia y unidad. La OTC acompaña este rumbo con una agenda robusta de cooperación entre gobiernos y sociedad civil, con protagonismo de los pueblos indígenas y participación activa de comunidades locales, academia y ciencia. Contamos con espacios de gobernanza regional, como la Red de Autoridades de Agua RADA, la Red de Autoridades de Manejo Integrado Fuego, el RAMIF, la Red de Autoridades Forestales RAFO, entre otros. Estas redes alinean esfuerzos, promueven cooperación a escala de paisaje y aseguran la coherencia entre conservar el bosque y mantener sus funciones para la vida y el bienestar de las personas. Desde la OTCA nos proponemos a impulsar agendas de cooperación regional con sinergias reales, de modo que cada acción avance en clima, biodiversidad, desertificación de tierras y vida digna para sus habitantes. La Amazonía ya es un lugar de soluciones. Queremos que hoy, en esta COP, nos inspire a ser más, mejor y juntos, porque en su diversidad está la fuerza y en nuestra cooperación está la esperanza. Muchas gracias a todos.
Neste momento, convido para a manifestação o diretor da Divisão de Mudança do Clima do PNUMA, Martin Kraus.
Excellencies, colleagues, good afternoon or better good evening. The new NDCs have made a slight difference to global warming predictions, but not enough of a difference. Most countries are off track to meet their 2030 commitments, never mind new 2035 targets. Excellencies, we are strolling along while climate change is sprinting. UNEP's emission gap report that was launched earlier this week finds that we need to cut 55% of global greenhouse gas emissions by 2035 to stay on a 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway with little or no overshoot. The size of these cuts, the time available, and current political trends means that temperatures will officially exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius. And that is very likely to happen within this decade. We cannot stop this from happening, but we can affect how far we go above and how quickly we come back down. To keep returning to 1.5 degrees Celsius by the end of this century, to keep this within the realms of possibility, we need rapid, unprecedented cuts to greenhouse gas emissions, far above what has been pledged. Addressing methane emissions and other short-lived climate pollutants is our emergency brake. We must pull it fast and forcefully. Such action is essential because every fraction of a degree avoided reduces damages, saves lives, reduces the need for carbon dioxide removal, and also lowers the need for adaptation. Excellencies, we must invest more in adaptation. UNEP's Adaptation Gap Report, which was launched about 10 days ago, finds that developing countries will need over $310 billion in adaptation finance per year by 2035. And that is 12 times as much as current international public adaptation finance flows. Temperature exceedance will require exponential investments in adaptation and in loss and damage. So, we need COP30 to deliver a clear plan to close the gaps on mitigation, on adaptation, and on finance. We need nations, and particularly the G20, to step up. Excellencies, we are on the right path, but with the wrong pace. UNEP is working with nations to deliver solutions, particularly those that bring socio-economic benefits, such as protecting forests, tackling short-lived climate pollutants such as methane, implementing cooling solutions, transforming the building and construction sector, and backing also early warning systems. Excellencies, investing in and implementing these solutions can rapidly bring down emissions, can save lives and deliver trillions of dollars in economic benefits. And that is what this COP must deliver. We welcome the COP focusing on implementation and on action. And we are pleased to be partners of the Beat the Heat, the Wildfires and other Multiraos. Many thanks. Obrigado.
Convidamos a diretora executiva do Fundo Verde do Clima, Mafalda Duarte.
Excellencies, colleagues, caros amigos brasileiros, let me begin by recognizing Brazil's leadership and thanking President Lula and the COP30 presidency for bringing us together here in Belém, no coração da Amazônia. Standing at the heart of the world's largest tropical forest, reminds us what's at stake: a stable climate in support of human prosperity, resilient ecosystems, and the dignity and inclusion of the people and communities who depend on them. We commend the Presidency for establishing the 4 leadership circles, which have created new bridges across ministries, financial institutions, civil society, indigenous and traditional communities, political leadership, and cultural sectors. The Circle of Finance Ministers, in particular, has been instrumental in guiding inputs to the Baku to Belém roadmap's bold target of mobilizing at least 1.3 trillion per year by 2035. We also recognize how the People's Circle and the Global Ethical Stocktake Circle have ensured that the voices, rights, and knowledge of indigenous people, Afro-descendant, and traditional communities are integrated in the global conversation. We further value the Multilateral for climate action as a principle that has amplified inclusivity throughout the process leading into Belém. This COP has rightly been called the implementation COP because promises kept matter more than promises made. It is time to focus on accountability and to stop pretending that there are trade-offs between climate ambition and human development. To recognize that climate finance, of which Green Climate Fund is at the heart of this system, has been critical in reducing the green premium of critical investments and helping prevent suffering for the poorest and most vulnerable. In that spirit, at this COP, we are highlighting our support to the Tropical Forest Forever Facility countries, advancing multi-level climate action, particularly for adaptation, and will soon unveil new momentum on country platforms in support of greater scale and impact of investments. These are all priorities in the COP's presidency action agenda. Excellencies, as most speakers have alluded, we gather at a defining moment in history and in a world shaken by overlapping crises. And amidst of all of this, last year, for the first time, we entered a 1.5-degree world. And partly because of the compounding crisis the world is facing, multilateralism and the post-Second World War is being tested. But 10 years after the Paris Agreement, we must recognize that multilateralism is delivering. Together, we have reduced projected global warming by around 1 degree. In many countries, emissions are falling even as economies grow. And as another example, renewable power is expanding faster than total energy demand. Change is happening, and the Green Climate Fund is helping drive it. Now, 10 years since we first approved our first project, we have grown into the world's largest multilateral climate fund for developing countries, delivering capital at scale, strengthening national systems, and building partnerships for lasting impact. With our $20 billion of investments and the $60 billion from our partners, we are on track to support 1.7 billion become more resilient to the impacts of climate change and reduce 3.2 billion tons of CO2 equivalent. These figures reflect the real-world change that happens when finance reaches where it can achieve the greatest impact. This year, we've achieved our highest volume of investments, more than $3 billion, a result of the reforms now taking hold as we work to build a $50 billion fund by 2030, one capable of mobilizing far greater volumes of public and private capital in alignment with the new collective quantified goal. As we look ahead to the next decisive decade, we will carry forward the spirit of Belém, a spirit of solidarity and delivery. We will continue to show that when the world works together, transformation is possible. I thank you.
Neste momento, encerramos a plenária da Cúpula do Clima de Belém. A todos e todas, muito obrigada pela presença e tenham uma boa noite.
A Amazônia não é Eldorado. Seus rios voadores irrigam o céu. Suas árvores sustentam o pulsar do mundo. Seus povos carregam saberes ancestrais, respostas para agora e para o amanhã. Aves, peixes, plantas, solos, águas são nossos parentes mais antigos. Divindades que guardam o segredo do renascer. Este corpo território reflete verdades do mundo. Neste mundo de águas, culturas se encontram, eclodem. O futuro nos interpela. Belém, Mairi, território ancestral. Essa é a COP da verdade. Defenda a vida.